Imagine you're sitting in a really high-stakes strategy meeting.
Oh, we have all been there.
Right. And a senior leader, like someone with a tremendous amount of influence over your career, proposes an idea that you just know won't work.
Like you have the hard data showing it's a disaster.
Exactly. It's going to cost the company a significant amount of money. And the room just goes completely quiet. Do you speak up or, do you stay quiet because you're terrified of the reaction?
Or maybe you're sitting there running the English translation through your head.
Yeah, terrified that because your English isn't absolutely perfect, you might, use the wrong word, sound unprofessional, and just lose all your credibility in an instant. Have you ever experienced this exact situation?
It is a universally terrifying moment. I mean, the palms get sweaty, the heart rate spikes, and it happens every single day in boardrooms all over the world.
It really does.
Yeah,
But, it doesn't have to end with you just staying silent.
definitely not.
Before we get into exactly how to handle that moment and the psychology behind why we freeze up, I want to quickly invite you to follow the English effect.
Yes, please do.
And make sure to subscribe to our deep dives on YouTube and absolutely download the free vocabulary companion from the link in the description.
You are definitely going to want that companion.
Yeah, it has all the professional business terminology we're going to cover today, ready for you to master.
Because today, we're taking a deep dive into workplace psychology. We want to equip you with the professional business English you need to actually navigate these exact high-pressure scenarios.
Right, we're going way beyond just basic definitions here.
Exactly. We want you to understand the nuance of how to communicate with real authority.
So our mission today is to explore how our minds actually work in modern professional environments. We're drawing on some really fantastic, heavy-hitting recent reports from Microsoft, McKinsey, the World Economic Forum, and a few others.
With some great data.
It really is. So I'll be breaking down the business realities, the corporate strategy, and the psychology of the workplace.
And I'll be guiding you through the natural language strategy. We'll explore the specific vocabulary, the idioms, and the expressions that native speakers use to navigate conflict and manage change.
Basically helping you sound completely in control of your career.
That's the goal.
So let's take you back into that meeting room. You're sitting there, the bad idea's on the table, and you are hesitating.
Right.
Before anyone can confidently speak up in that situation, the right environment actually has to exist. I mean, you can't just mandate courage.
You really can't.
We have to start with the foundation of the workplace itself. And according to the research from McKinsey, that foundation relies entirely on a concept called psychological safety.
We do hear this term a lot lately. But in a corporate context, psychological safety describes the total absence of interpersonal fear.
The absence of fear.
Exactly. It's a climate where people feel, completely comfortable taking risks, proposing wild ideas, and even admitting massive mistakes.
Without being terrified of negative consequences to their career.
Right. Or their reputation.
But I think it's crucial to understand that psychological safety is not about being, nice all the time.
Oh, definitely not.
It's not about giving everyone a participation trophy. It's about being able to look a senior director in the eye and say, hey, this project is failing, without worrying you'll be fired for just bringing it up.
Yes.
McKinsey's data shows that when this safety is present, teams are vastly more innovative. But, and here's where it gets really interesting, when you lack psychological safety, you don't just get a quiet, compliant team.
No, you usually get a toxic culture.
Exactly.
And, the word toxic has shifted so much in modern business vocabulary. We aren't talking about physical danger or literal poison anymore. In today's workplace, a toxic culture describes an environment that psychologically harms the people in it. It's characterized by paranoia, extreme office politics, and subtle bullying.
So if you're listening to this right now, how would you describe your workplace? Do you feel psychologically safe, or are you constantly guarding your back?
That's a really important question to ask yourself.
Because if an organization allows that toxicity to fester, the financial damage is absolutely unbelievable. Look at this data from tech class.
Oh, this blew my mind.
Right. They note that workplace incivility, which is like a primary hallmark of a toxic culture, it costs organizations roughly $2 billion a day globally in lost productivity.
$2 billion a day.
Just because people are stressed and distracted by office politics. But the biggest cost isn't just lost focus, it's people walking out the door. A toxic culture is 10.4 times more predictive of attrition than compensation.
That word attrition is incredibly important in HR and management.
Let's break that down.
So, attrition isn't just people getting fired. It refers to the gradual reduction of a workforce by employees voluntarily leaving and not being
It's
replaced.
like an invisible drain.
Exactly. People just slowly bleed out of the organization because they are exhausted.
I always think of this dynamic like a company trying to sail a boat with a massive hole in the bottom. You can pump all the money, all the compensation, all the, ping pong tables and free lunches into this boat.
But the water's still leaking.
Right. Your absolute best talent is going to continually drain out through that hole. And one of the primary behaviors creating that hole is something called gatekeeping,
Yes, Tech Class points out that toxic managers frequently use gatekeeping to hold back their high potential people.
which is so damaging.
It is. Gatekeeping is a brilliant visual metaphor, but it's more than just a guard at a gate. In business, gatekeeping is the act of controlling, and usually severely limiting access to information, resources, or opportunities.
Now, wait a minute. I have to push back here a little
Yeah,
bit.
go ahead.
If I'm a senior manager and I have a junior employee who is like very ambitious, but simply isn't ready for a massive client-facing project, and I decide to withhold that opportunity from them, is that toxic gatekeeping? Or is that just responsible management and quality control?
Ah, see, that is a fantastic distinction. The difference lies entirely in the intent.
Okay.
Responsible management protects the project and the client. Gatekeeping protects the manager's ego and status.
I see.
Gatekeeping in a toxic culture is like a manager pulling up the ladder after they've already climbed it. They aren't holding you back because you weren't ready. They are actively neutralizing you because they view your talent as a threat to their own position.
That is so toxic.
Right. If they hide a promotion from you because they don't want to lose you on their own team, that is gatekeeping.
That makes a lot of sense. The intent is entirely self-serving. So if you are a highly skilled professional stuck behind a manager who has pulled up the ladder, of course you are going to leave. So what does this all mean for the organization? How do you plug the holes in that boat and actually build psychological safety? It almost always comes down to overhauling how people give and receive feedback.
And this requires a massive shift in communication style. You can't just tell people to be honest. You have to teach them how to do it without triggering an emotional reaction.
Exactly. Research from Inspiring Workplaces outlines a really effective three-part structure for constructive feedback.
Which is great.
But before we get to the structure, they emphasize one critical rule. For feedback to actually be heard, it has to be separated entirely from compensation.
Oh, that makes total psychological sense.
Think about the mechanism here. If I pull you into my office, tell you that your strategic analysis on the last campaign was fundamentally flawed, and in the very next breath, tell you your annual bonus is being cut by 20%.
Your brain's amygdala completely hijacks the conversation.
Exactly. You trigger a fight or flight response. You don't hear the feedback to improve. You just hear that your livelihood is under attack.
Your defenses go up immediately. And that is exactly why we use the specific term constructive feedback.
Right.
The adjective constructive implies that the information is designed to help the person build, improve, and develop their skills for the future. It is the exact opposite of destructive criticism, which only seeks to tear someone down.
So true. Once you separate it from compensation, the three-part structure is incredibly practical. First, you focus exclusively on a specific behavior, not a personality trait.
So no name calling.
Right. You never say you are careless. You say, in the last 3 reports, there were calculation errors. Second, you explain why that behavior matters to the business. Like, because of those errors, the client lost trust in our projections.
Makes sense.
And third, you outline the next step or solution together. But delivering this smoothly, especially in modern global companies, requires an entirely different layer of skill. Researchers call it cultural competence.
Cultural competence is arguably the most vital soft skill of this decade.
It really is.
It is the ability to deeply understand, communicate with, and effectively interact with people across entirely different cultural backgrounds. It requires a highly diplomatic mindset.
And the return on investment for that competence is massive. Research out of USC shows that culturally diverse companies who actually possess this competence perform 36% better financially than their homogeneous competitors.
Wow, 36%.
Yeah, but here is the catch. If you build a diverse team but nobody have cultural competence, you don't get innovation. You just get constant friction offense, and misunderstandings.
Which is exactly why the specific phrasing we choose when giving feedback or disagreeing is so critical.
Definitely.
A fantastic source from Laura highlights polite, professional English that maintains psychological safety, even when you fundamentally disagree.
Oh, this is the good stuff.
Right. So think back to our opening scenario in the meeting room. A colleague proposes a terrible strategy. If you just say you're wrong, what happens?
You completely destroy the psychological safety in the room. The other person instantly feels attacked and humiliated in front of their peers.
Right. Instead, we want to soften the blow while maintaining our authority. A great expression to use is, I see it slightly differently.
I see it slightly differently. I love that.
It is incredibly professional. It communicates that you have an opposing view, but it invites a dialogue rather than starting a combat scenario. Which response sounds more professional to you?
I really like the nuance of that. It acknowledges their perspective exists, but gently pivots to yours. But what about when someone is explaining a complex new system and they are just doing a terrible job and you have absolutely no idea what they're talking about?
Yeah, that happens all the time.
If you just say, I don't understand, it can make you look out of the loop. Or it can make the speaker feel defensive about their presentation skills.
A much more strategic alternative is to ask, could you clarify what you mean by it? And then reference a specific point.
Okay, give me an example.
So you could say, could you clarify what you mean by the new integration timeline? This mechanism puts the focus on the specific information that is missing, rather than framing it as a failure of your own comprehension or, a failure of their explanation.
It's very collaborative. Now, what if you really need to push back firmly? Let's say the stakes are incredibly high, millions of dollars are on the line, and the senior leader is about to make a huge mistake.
In that case, you need firm, respectful boundary setting. Instead of saying, this won't work, you use the expression, respectfully, I have to disagree.
Now, let me challenge that for a moment.
Sure.
If you're working in a highly hierarchical culture, perhaps a traditional corporate structure in East Asia, or even certain legacy banking institutions in the West, doesn't putting respectfully in front of a disagreement still come across as insubordinate? Could that be career suicide?
If you do it in front of 50 people, yes, it absolutely could be. And that is where cultural competence must be paired with language. The phrase, respectfully, I have to disagree, is linguistically perfect. But the cultural competence dictates where and when you use it.
I see.
In a hierarchical culture, you might not use that phrase in the main meeting. You wait until a one-on-one scenario behind closed doors to deploy it. That saves their face in public, but allows you to state your professional objection clearly in private.
That is a phenomenal distinction. It's not just the words, it's the context.
Exactly.
And mastering both the words and the context builds the trust you're going to need to survive what is coming next in the business world.
Yes, because once a team has established psychological safety and clear communication, they are finally prepared to face the absolute biggest psychological stressor in the modern workplace.
Which is?
The blistering pace of technological change.
Oh, absolutely. The World Economic Forum recently published their 2025 Future of Jobs report, and the numbers are just staggering.
They really are.
86% of employers expect artificial intelligence to drive a massive transformation in their businesses over the next few years. This is creating a desperate, immediate need for two major concepts: reskilling and upskilling.
We really need to define the nuance between these two because they are often confused.
Let's do it.
So reskilling means learning entirely new skills to do a completely different job. It's a lateral move.
Like changing careers within the same company.
Right. Think of a traditional data entry clerk whose entire job is automated by AI. They might undergo reskilling to become a cybersecurity analyst.
Okay, and upskilling.
Upskilling, on the other hand, means improving upon your existing skills to advance in your current career path. It is vertical. A marketing director learning to use advanced AI predictive modeling to better understand consumer behavior, that is upskilling.
Now, here is the fear that is keeping professionals awake at night. If we are upskilling and we are letting AI do all of our deep analysis, all of our data crunching, writing our reports, and solving our logistical problems, aren't we going to lose our own critical thinking skills?
It's a common word.
Won't our human brains essentially just atrophy because the machine is doing all the heavy lifting? Are we making ourselves obsolete?
It is a very valid fear, but the Microsoft Work Trend Index addresses this beautifully. They studied highly effective AI users and identified a group they call the frontier professional.
The frontier professional.
Yes. These are people who are heavily utilizing AI in their daily workflow, but, and this is the critical mechanism, they absolutely refuse to outsource their thinking.
So how does a frontier professional actually structure their day differently than someone who is just blindly relying on ChatGPT?
They treat AI like an incredibly fast but slightly naive intern.
I love that analogy.
Right. They delegate the routine, repetitive tasks. They let the AI write the first draft of an email or summarize a massive spreadsheet or pull the initial research. But the human maintains strict judgment, quality control, and the original strategic intent.
They don't just copy and paste.
Exactly. They review the AI's work with extreme scrutiny. Deloitte frames this shift perfectly. We are no longer in an era of humans plus machines where we just work side by side. We are moving to an era of humans times machines. The AI is a multiplier.
A multiplier. If you have bad judgment, the AI multiplies your bad judgment and creates chaos faster.
Sadly, yes.
But if you have great strategic insight, the AI multiplies your ability to execute it. That brings up the core business concept of value creation.
Exactly. Value creation is the ultimate goal. It is the process of producing something that has tangible value to the company, the stakeholders, or the customer.
Because the AI alone doesn't do that.
No, AI alone does not create final value. It just processes data. The human directing the AI, ensuring quality, applying emotional intelligence, and making the final judgment call, that is what leads to true value creation.
So the human competitive advantage isn't data processing anymore. It's critical thinking and adaptability. And the World Economic Forum report backs this up completely. They list the top in-demand skills for the future, and right at the top are analytical thinking and agility.
Agility is the perfect word here. In a business context, agility is the ability to move quickly, adapt to sudden changes, and think on your feet without getting paralyzed by indecision.
Which is so hard to do.
It is. If your entire industry shifts overnight because a new AI tool is released, your agility determines whether you panic or whether you pivot and thrive.
And a huge part of demonstrating that agility to your team is how efficiently you manage the endless, overwhelming stream of communication that comes with fast-paced change.
Definitely. When things are changing rapidly, nobody has time to read a 5-paragraph confusing email to figure out what you want.
That's true.
The Laura Source teaches a brilliant framework for managing this called the 5 C's of communication: clear, concise, correct, courteous, and concrete. And the secret mechanism to achieving this is a technique called front-loading.
I want to dig into front-loading because it completely changes how you're perceived by executives.
It really does. To front-load an email or a presentation means you put the absolute most important information, your main point, or your specific request right at the very beginning.
You don't bury the lead.
Exactly. You do not build up to it. You don't make the reader dig through 3 paragraphs of background context to figure out what you actually need from them. You front-load it to respect their time and reduce their cognitive load.
Think about the difference here. A bad email starts with, as you know, we've been working on the Q3 project for several weeks, and we faced some delays with the vendor, and also the software had a bug.
The executive reading that is getting so anxious.
Right. They're thinking, what is the point? Are we failing? But a front-loaded email starts with, I am writing to request a $5,000 budget increase for the Q3 project to cover unexpected vendor delays. Context is below.
Ooh.
Boom. Right at the top. The executive knows exactly what the email is about in 3 seconds.
It is infinitely more professional. But, let's be honest about the emotional reality of the modern professional.
Yeah.
With all this intense pressure, the pressure to be agile, to master AI, to front-load your communication, to navigate complex cross-cultural teams, it is incredibly common for professionals to start quietly doubting themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you are trying to do all of this in a second or third language, that doubt can be completely paralyzing.
It can crush you. And that brings us to a psychological phenomenon that is absolutely rampant in the corporate world right now: imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome is the persistent, nagging inability to believe that your success is deserved. You feel like it hasn't been legitimately achieved through your own skills, but rather through luck, or because you somehow tricked everyone.
You literally feel like an imposter, like a fraud who is about to be unmasked.
It's a terrible feeling.
An article from Tolera points out that 70% of adults feel like frauds at some point in their careers.
Yeah.
But for language learners, the mechanism of imposter syndrome is particularly brutal.
It really is.
Why? Because we naturally tend to equate linguistic fluency with intellectual capability. If you stumble on a preposition during a presentation, your brain immediately tells you that you sound incompetent, even if your underlying business strategy is utterly brilliant.
Yes,
If
exactly.
you're listening to this right now and thinking, I can never push back on my boss, my English isn't good enough, you are experiencing exactly what Dallaire is describing.
It is a very heavy burden to carry, but you have to recognize it as a cognitive distortion. Your language skills do not define your intelligence or your business acumen.
In fact, we need to completely flip the script on this. Having a diverse language background is not a deficit. It is a massive strategic advantage.
It really is.
From a business perspective, if you speak multiple languages and come from a different cultural background, you are injecting something highly valuable into your team. Yeah. The researchers at Tech Class call this cognitive diversity.
Cognitive diversity is a beautiful concept. It refers to the inclusion of people who have fundamentally different ways of thinking, different viewpoints, different life experiences, and different problem-solving approaches.
And here is the why behind it.
Mm.
Cognitive diversity acts as an anti-fragility mechanism for a company.
Anti-fragility. I like that.
Think about a team where everyone went to the same universities, speaks the exact same native language, and comes from the same cultural background. We call that homogeneous groupthink.
Right. They all think exactly alike.
And that team might feel very comfortable with each other, but they're actually incredibly fragile. A single unexpected market shift or a nuance in a foreign market can completely destroy their strategy because they all share the exact same blind spots.
Very true.
Think of all the disastrous, tone-deaf marketing campaigns we've seen global brands launch. That happens because of homogeneous groupthink. No one was in the room to say, hey, in my culture, this image is actually highly offensive.
Exactly. But a cognitively diverse team. They see problems from completely different angles. They challenge each other's assumptions.
So you aren't just an English learner trying to keep up. Your unique, diverse brain is an asset that actively protects the company from its own blind spots.
That is an incredibly empowering reframe. The focus has to shift away from achieving flawless, perfect English grammar and move toward achieving clear, impactful communication. And to help with that, there are specific linguistic tools you can use to reduce your own cognitive load and command a room, even if you feel that imposter syndrome creeping in. One of the absolute best tools for presentations is called signposting.
Signposting, like a physical sign on a highway?
Exactly like that. Signposting means using very specific, predictable words and phrases to guide your listener through your logic, giving them a verbal roadmap of where you are taking them.
How does that actually work in practice?
A classic example is the expression, moving to my second point.
Oh, okay.
When you explicitly state this, you are clearly signaling a transition. Think about why this helps you. Even if you get nervous and stumble over a vocabulary word in the very next sentence, your audience isn't lost.
They know exactly where they are in your presentation structure.
Right. It reduces the mental effort required for them to follow you, and it makes you sound incredibly organized and authoritative.
It gives you a safety net. What about in a negotiation? Negotiations are a breeding ground for imposter syndrome because there's inherent conflict and high stakes.
For negotiations, you want language that builds bridges rather than walls. Instead of aggressively demanding a concession, try using the idiom. We're prepared to meet you halfway.
Meet you halfway.
Yes. To meet someone halfway means to offer a compromise. It signals that you are flexible and reasonable while still firmly protecting your own core interests.
We're prepared to meet you halfway. It sounds mature. It de-escalates tension.
And if you feel the negotiation is getting stuck in the weeds or becoming overly adversarial, you can use a fantastic expression to reset the entire tone of the room.
What's the phrase?
I think we're aligned on the end goal.
Oh, that's good.
Being aligned means you share the same ultimate objective, even if you are arguing about the path to get there. This phrase forces everyone to pause, remember their shared objectives, and it instantly creates positive momentum. What would you say in your next meeting to show you are aligned with your team?
Just practicing these phrases out loud in your car or in front of a mirror can physically reduce the anxiety associated with imposter syndrome. You have the tools ready to deploy.
You really do.
So let's look at the incredible journey we've taken today. We've unpacked the biological and psychological necessity of psychological safety and how toxic cultures and gatekeeping lead to massive, invisible attrition.
We explored the mechanics of delivering constructive feedback and how developing cultural competence allows you to safely say, I see it slightly differently, without triggering defensiveness.
We looked at the reality of AI and the future of work, realizing that as we undergo reskilling and upskilling, True value creation will not come from the machines. It will come from the human agility and critical thinking of frontier professionals.
And finally, we dismantled imposter syndrome. We reframed your diverse background as essential cognitive diversity and armed you with signposting and negotiation phrases to help you communicate your brilliant ideas with authority, focusing on clarity over perfection.
We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today.
We certainly have. And remember, you do not have to memorize all of this just by listening. Please make sure you follow the English Effect, subscribe to our deep dives on YouTube, and absolutely download that free vocabulary companion from the description.
It's the best way to review all 20 expressions we unpacked today.
Exactly. And if you found this valuable, share this deep dive with a colleague or a friend who might be wrestling with their own imposter syndrome.
To wrap up today's conversation, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought from the tech class research. We've talked a lot about what you owe the company, but let's talk about what they owe you.
Oh, this is a great point.
They discuss an economic theory called strategic appreciation. The core idea is that when a company invests heavily in your learning and development, when they pay for your upskilling or send you to a premier leadership seminar, it acts as a costly signal. It is undeniable, expensive proof that they value your long-term future with the organization.
Because words are cheap. A manager can say, "Great job," but a financial investment is a costly signal that cannot be faked.
Exactly.
Mm.
But if they just make you watch a mandatory 10-minute video on password security, that isn't a costly signal. That is just compliance training to protect their own liability.
Right.
So I want you to look around your workplace tomorrow. Look at the training, the mentorship, and the resources your company actually provides you. Are they just checking a compliance box? Or are they actively, strategically investing in your cognitive diversity?
Are they truly signaling their belief in your future value?
It is the ultimate metric to measure your own real standing in the organization. Let that question sit with you.
It's a powerful thought.
So the next time you find yourself sitting in that high-stakes strategy meeting, feeling the urge to hold back a brilliant insight because of a little linguistic self-doubt, ask yourself, are you going to let an imposter silence the exact cognitively diverse perspective they hired you to share?
Won't let it.
Speak up. You have the vocabulary. You have the strategy. We will see you next time.